They're investing in the ability of the community to act collectively. They're investing in the ability of the community to act collectively. And you know, if you think about it, about this kind of an action, you think that this is an action which has many different possibilities. Now, there are some people who are going around and building schools and building hospitals. There are other people who are going around and saying, what we want to do is simply do community development, empowerment of communities so they can begin to act together. There are other people who are focusing on human rights and says, let us focus on the issues of rights. If somebody's rights are violated, then we are not a community. There are other people who are going around and serving the society and the community in many other ways. There are other people who simply stand up for some kind of a principle which enables the society to come around and gather around itself. The Lord Buddha, in one of his saying, you know, the great eightfold path, that there are a number of different ways in which you can serve. You know, he said there's a path of love, there's a path of knowledge, there's a path of service, there's a path of action. I mean, in the same way, one can think that these are people who are serving the community, building the community through a number of different paths. These different paths are coming together. But at the end of the day, there is one thing that unites all of them. When you say people are building the community in many different ways, some through service and some through action and some through love and some through rights and advocacy and so on and so forth, you ask yourself, I mean, just think about these people, that at the end of the day, there is something that unites all of them. And that something is a very simple word, and that word is justice. It is the spine that holds all of these together. So whether you think of a Shoaib Sultan Khan, who is enabling the poor to act collectively, or whether you think in terms of Asma Jahangir, who stands up for the rights of women and minorities, or whether you think of Muhtara Mai, or whether you think of Abdul Sattar Edi, or whether you think of Iqbal Ahmed, or Akhtar Hamid Khan, that what unites them is the concept of justice. The problem is, there cannot be a society without justice. Without society, admittedly, there cannot be justice. But equally and much more importantly, without justice, there cannot be a society. If we think of a society, the reason why people come together is because of the notion of justice. And what these people are trying to do is to incarnate the idea of justice in our midst. And some people say the only way to talk about justice today is to talk about the rights of the poor, their ability, their capacity, their ability to get out of poverty. And others will say the only way to talk about justice is to give something to the poor that they can use. And some people will say the only way to talk about poverty is to talk about the rights of oppressed people. And some people will say the only way to talk about justice is to talk about, for instance, I talk about the environment quite a lot. I'm not a tree lover. I'm not a tree hugger. I have no particular affinity for animals. My wife laughs at me because she says, "Tumhe to drakhton ke naam bhi nahi aate." And it's true, I don't know the names of the trees. But I believe that in the 21st century, you cannot talk about justice without talking about the environment. In Pakistan, you cannot talk about justice without talking about the rights of women. It's impossible. In Pakistan, you cannot talk about justice without talking about the rights of minorities, about religious minorities, about linguistic minorities, about sectarian minorities. In Pakistan, you cannot talk about justice without talking about natural resources, about the trees that we are destroying, about the lands that we are converting to desert. We cannot talk about justice without that. Justice is bringing things back into a balance. Justice is taking responsibility for our actions. And these are the people who are trying to do this. Justice is not only a means of building a good society. Justice is a means of building society itself. Without justice, there cannot be a society. From time immemorial, we've seen this. We know this since Aristotle. We know this since the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We know this since Jesus Christ. We have known all of this, that justice is the glue that holds a society together. And what we need to ask ourselves is, what is that basis of justice to which we in our context adhere? What are the people that we think of as part of our community? If I can talk to my daughter and I say, This is the Pakistan that I'm talking about. It's the Pakistan of the people who are committed to the notion of justice. Who are committed to the notion of justice. They all find a different way of coming to it. Like the Buddha's eightfold path. Some find it through one way and some find it through another way. But what unites them is that they're committed to the notion of justice. But by being committed to the notion of justice, what these people are doing is to create the community of Pakistan itself. It is the only thing that will ensure that when our generation passes from the scene, when we die and the next generation comes in, they too will be proud to call themselves Pakistani. That's the only thing that will remain. Nothing else is likely to remain. This is a problem, I should say, is a problem at the global level also. Because at the global level, we live in a cutthroat world in which there is no justice. And part of the problem is to create justice at the global level. And of course, we are part of that argument, part of that debate, because of the particular geopolitical circumstances in which we live. But it is also a problem fundamentally at the national level, and we are part of that problem as well. Now, I come back to the work of the Human Development Foundation. I think of that work at two different levels. There is one level in which you can understand it very simply. It's the provision of services. It's the provision of services. Build hospitals, build schools, provide loans, help the development process, build capacity, build training, and so forth. It's the provision of service. But there's a much more fundamental problem. But there's a much more fundamental goal, and that is to build the community of what we call Pakistan. To build our community, to bring us together, to bring us together with the people who are committed to the same goals in Pakistan, but by doing so, to build the entire community of Pakistan, to build the whole nation as an entity in itself. This is a synergistic relationship, and no matter what HDF does, it cannot ever forget that it has both of these goals. If it only focuses on one, the simpler goal, it will forget that the more fundamental goal that drives it is the building of the community. Because remember, no matter how many schools you build, it is not enough. No matter how many injections that you give to the children, it's not enough. It's a drop in the bucket. But what you're really doing is to create a model around which people can coalesce so that people can do it themselves. And that you're doing by being committed to this idea of building that community. That's the more fundamental contribution that you're going to make. You people, the people sitting in Pakistan, together, that's the combination that you're going to make. So when I thought of the way future, I asked myself, what can the Human Development Foundation do? I've given some ideas to Atiya and other board members. I do think that maintaining the emphasis on services, the kind of things that Azhar was talking about, is absolutely fundamental, because that is really gives the legitimacy, the basis for you to even act in the country. But it has to be recognized, both consciously and practically, that it serves both of those functions, and the other function should not be forgotten. But beyond that, it is also time, now that the legitimacy has been built up, to go on to think about an expanded set of programs, and perhaps some of these ideas might be very useful. One idea that I think its time has come, it is this idea that I talked about, the Right Livelihood Award. This group, the World Future Council and the Right Livelihood Award organization, gives people awards for the right livelihood, for building community, for investing in the idea of justice. They give this award. And you can think of this award as untied grants to somebody who you think is doing fundamental and basic work that builds the community of Pakistan. Thinking about a Right Livelihood Award for Pakistan, I think, is a very important one. Number two, I think it is also the time to actually think about a council of Pakistanis which is committed to the future. We are too much caught up in the day-to-day activities, and we come together from time to time to think about some of the longer range work through HDF and through other organizations. But it's very important at this stage to try to bring the moral weight of people who are so committed to bear upon a larger problem, for that moral weight to come out and become a voice of conscience for Pakistan, to create a council for the future.